the meeting open and welcome you to this month's meeting of Council. The recording of this Council meeting will be available to the public on Council's website for a minimum period of 6 months. In accordance with Council's policy, I will now ask staff to confirm that the recording has commenced.
Yes, it has, ma'am.
Thank you. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the South East Nation, the Malacadee people of the Yuin River and the Linnaquani people of the far south. We recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. Tonight in attendance we have Deputy Mayor Thorpe, we have Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Jessup, Councillor Temby, Councillor Burgess, Councillor Camber-Smith and Councillor O'Neill. General Manager, would you like to introduce your staff, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We've got the Director of Governance, Strategy and Sustainable Development, Matthew Grimsey, our Director of People and Corporate Services, David Spinks, Director of Infrastructure, Climate and Environmental Services, Lockie Krantz, Acting Director, Community and Wellbeing Services, Lyle Ground, and our Media and Comms Coordinator, Kelly Davis, and Executive Assistant, Sandy Rostel.
Thank you. 2.1 apologies, we have nil. 2.2 we have leave of absence, Councillor Gibson. Absent, nil. Councillors, do you wish to declare any declarations of interest, please? Yes, we'll start with Councillor Thorpe, please.
Yeah, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest in agenda item 10.013-23.
And that is?
The report under 35F. A relative has made a submission.
Thank you. Councillor Jessup.
As per Councillor Thorpe, I have one of the corrections I had some group involved with.
Thank you. Councillor Burgess.
Yeah, someone.
Would you like to read that out for me, please? What
It is 10.01323.
Your microphone.
Agenda item number 10.01320/23, 35F and direction 3.
Thank you. Councillor Camber-Smith.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, I wish to declare a non-pecuniary interest in two of the submissions being considered this evening under agenda item 10.01323 on additional items related to the Section 35 report. I put in submissions to the draft local provisions schedule as a private resident prior to standing for council, as I was entitled to do under the Land Use and Planning and Approval Act 1993 on properties owned by Mr Smutney and Mr and Mrs Duggan, whose own submissions are being considered this evening. So I will recuse myself from discussion on those two items.
Thank you. We don't have any others? No? Okay, thank you. 4, confirmation of minutes, 4.007/23. Do I have a councillor to move the minutes as circulated are confirmed for the ordinary meeting of council the 28th of June 2023? Councillor Temby and Councillor Burgess. Do any councillors wish to make any changes? No? Well, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present and the motion is carried. 5, legislative items. General Manager, are there any legislative items?
No, Mayor.
Urgent matters. Are there any urgent matters?
No, Mayor.
I have an announcement to make, and it was in this week's Yuin News as well. Yuin Valley Council has recently conducted joint collaboration meetings with Derwent Valley Council, Tas Police, Sustainable Timbers and relevant politicians regarding illegal dumping of rubbish, antisocial behaviour and illegal woodhooking. As a result of these meetings, Tas Police has conducted Operation Eucalypt, which is aimed at targeting the illegal sale of firewood and the dumping of rubbish occurring within the Huon Valley. It is illegal to dump rubbish, household rubbish and commercial rubbish on forestry land, and there are strict requirements about gathering firewood, which is illegal without a permit. Permits are available from Sustainable Timbers Tasmania for the sole purpose of gathering firewood for your own personal use. The sale of firewood obtained under those permits is not authorised. Community members are asked to be cautious when arranging to have rubbish removed from their property or buying firewood, particularly if done through social media platforms. Always ask the question of the person you are dealing with to ensure that rubbish is disposed of legally and that the firewood is not stolen. Simply stating you are not aware of illegal activities does not mean you are not a party to the crime. Any information about illegal firewood gathering and rubbish dumping can be reported to the police on 131 444 or through Crime Stoppers at crimestopperstas.com.au or on 1800 333 000. You can stay anonymous. 8. Public participation, public question time. 8.1.1. Answers to questions taken on previous questions taken on notice. There was no questions taken on notice at the June meeting. 8.1.2 questions on notice. There were 2 questions from the Huon Valley Ratepayers Association and from the Friends of the Dover Medical Service regarding a proposed footpath in Dover, and Irene Swan regarding a Future of Local Government review leaflet. As previously mentioned, the questions given on notice and the responses can be found on the website. Okay, if you'd like to come back up to the microphone. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I am Ali Richardson from Strathblane. I'm representing the Friends of Dover Medical Services as well. Yep. So thank you for your response to our questions as mentioned in the documentation for tonight's meeting. We do ask if we could have the opportunity to establish a collaborative process to work with designated Huon Valley Council officers until March 2024 estimates, with a review to identifying the route and the costs and ways the local community could best contribute to better our chances for expediting the Dover footpath. And secondly, we have a question, and will the officers of the Huon Valley Council take up the request of Senator Duniam and the Minister of Infrastructure and Transport to meet and discuss this matter further? I think you touched on that, Mayor. Thank you.
Yes, we will let you know.
Thank you.
What we can do, what we will do about that. Thank you very much, Dr. Smith.
Liz Smith, Signet. My question is about the future of local government, agenda number 15.028/23. At its meeting on July the 17th, Kingborough Council considered a number of scenarios for local government reform through which there could be mergers either with the Western Shore, that is Hobart and other municipalities, or the Southern Shore, which is the Huon Valley. And this was described in the Southern Shore Community Catchment Information Pack, which came with the agenda. That council resolved to provide a submission to the local government board that A, it reiterates council's continued openness to reform that seeks to deliver a more capable and sustainable system of local government, and B, expresses council's openness to collaborate with Huon Valley Council to further investigate Southern Shore Scenario 2. It appears that Kingborough Council expects that there will be discussions with Huon Valley Council regarding Scenario 2. The recommendation in the agenda this evening is to endorse the report in Attachment B, in which the preferred scenario is for Huon Valley Council to remain as is, which is Scenario 1. The second preference is to merge with what is described, or what was described by the Council before 2016 when it was dismissed, as Margate South, that is Scenario 3. And the third is to merge with Kingborough, perhaps without Taroona, which is Scenario 2. The Huon Valley Council engagement resulted in very low response rates, with only 148 from the Huon Valley community of about 17,000, 21 staff out of about 140, I think, and 4 councillors out of 9. So the first part of my question is, are these responses considered to provide sufficient information to demonstrate support for any of the potential scenarios? That's the first part of the question.
Okay, yes.
I'll go on to the second part.
Yes, please, and then we can answer.
Thank you. I note that the Mayor and GM met with the Mayor and GM of Kingborough Council before the preferences had been confirmed by either council. It is not clear what was discussed. So the second part of my question is, would councillors be open to further talks involving all councillors from both Huon Valley and Kingborough councils as our community's representatives to thoroughly discuss the issues raised in the Southern Shore Community Catchment Information Pack and how they might be addressed by the 2 councils and the local government board?
Thank you. To answer the first part of your question on what Kingborough put through their council meeting,
it was actually about the support that was demonstrated in the community engagement in the Huon Valley, not Kingborough.
But you brought up about the fact that we'd been to Kingborough.
Oh, that was the second part.
Oh, that was the second part, was it? Sorry. Well, the second part then of your question, we did meet with the GM and the Mayor at Kingborough, who had a totally different view at that stage on what they were going to support. It was very much stay at as is, with Taroona going to Hobart. Then they had their council meeting, and they've come back with a different. I have spoken to the Mayor, and I have been asked whether by the government, well, are we open to sit down and have conversations? We're always open to that conversation, and no doubt we will have those as it progresses. And as far as the survey goes, well, that was the government's survey, and so we can only go off what we have in front of us, and that's how our vote came back. And we've had some really good discussions around the table amongst ourselves, and so that's how we came up with our submission that we're putting forward, the recommendation going forward tonight later on in the meeting. So yes, I know that Kingborough's come out and said that they're open to that, and I don't know what's changed, only that when I spoke to the Mayor, she did state that she's hoping that we can all sit down around the table and discuss this, which we will.
Good, and I hope that it will include all councillors, because we elected the councillors to represent us, and there may be differing views. I think it's really important that the councillors from both councils hear what all the councillors have to say on the matter.
Yeah, and you can be assured that the submission that we are putting before council tonight was strongly around our table with all councillors present. So
Yes.
that always is all councillors.
What I'm asking is
I know.
that all councillors from the Huon Valley meet with all councillors from Kingborough.
And we will do our best to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yes, at the back there, Amy, thank you.
Hi, Amy Robertson of Port Huon.
Thank you.
A community heard this week from TPC that TPC are going to attempt to sort out the planning scheme without the benefit of any council strategy. They're not expecting the LUDs to be ready in time. Given this takes off the pressure of a deadline from the TPC process, does Huon Valley Council consider there is merit in any different approach to the LUDs that changes its scope or timeline?
Okay, through you, General Manager, to the Director, if I...
Through you, Mayor, no, the current timeline is to December. If we were to try and truncate that, there would be no community engagement as part of the process, which is unacceptable. So December is the timeline that we're working to.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from the floor? There you go. We all got them in.
Did about 4 more, but it doesn't matter.
8.2 is deputations. General Manager, are there any deputations?
No, Mayor.
No. Petitions. General Manager, are there any petitions?
Yes, Mayor, we have 2. First one is I'd like to table a petition lodged with the Council 10th of July, which was a petition regarding the widening of approximately 475 metres of Leamington Road. So the petition contains 223 signatories and complies with the requirements of Section 57(2) of the Local Government Act 1993.
Okay, so it's 9.002/23. Do I have a councillor to move that the petition regarding the widening of approximately 475 metres of Leamington Road lodged with Council on the 10th of July 2023 be received? Councillor Canberra-Smith, and a seconder, Councillor Armstrong. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
I just have a question, Mayor.
No, it's just receiving it. That's all I'm doing at the moment. Thank you. Yep, that's all, councillors, and that is carried. I think we come back to petitions.
Did you want to ask the question regarding that one? Or do you want to answer?
Is it about the next set of the process?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
I
for
forgot.
the
Yep.
purpose of people, you know, in the gallery and listening and online.
Yeah.
What will happen with that petition from here on? I had to ask that question myself, so I think it's appropriate.
Through you, Mayor, the petition is received at tonight's meeting. There will be a report on any action on the petition to be presented to the August Council meeting.
Thank you. Agenda item 9.003/23, petition regarding Franklin Opportunity Area. General Manager, could you please clarify this report before I put it for recommendation?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So we have received a petition regarding the Franklin Residential Opportunity Area. It was lodged with us on the 21st of June as follows. So to the Huon Valley Council, we, the undersigned, hereby request that any future residential expansion for Franklin follows the recommendation of architect and heritage consultant Graham Corney, that the urban growth boundary would be more appropriately somewhere around the 20-metre contour line. This would confine urban growth to a small area of consolidation to the back of existing village area and would be well screened from the main road. Importantly, the rural backdrop would be maintained. So it's noted that the petition was received by Council on the 21st of June, but was not allocated for officer review. This meant it was not tabled at the June Council meeting. The petition is therefore presented along with the report in consideration for any action to be taken at this July Council meeting.
Okay, so I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Jessup and Councillor Canberra-Smith.
I'd like to move a slightly. I'd like to just fiddle with the wording of the motion, if I may, Mayor.
So you'd like to change the wording of the...
No, I'm moving a motion which will have some slightly different wording. I think that's allowable.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay.
I'm trying to do a couple of things with this, but the advice I've had from Mr Grimsey that the second part of what I want to do, which is to actually forward this to as a submission to the Planning Commission, I need to do in the next part of the activity is the 35F. So all I really want to do at this point is to make a comment in accepting the motion. So A and B remain the same, but C it will change, and this is a wording that I have emailed Mr Grimsey and yourself. C becomes, the council notes that the urban growth boundary of Franklin has been under consideration for over 10 years and is likely to remain unresolved in the Ludds project for at least another 2 years. There is a demonstrable benefit of giving the community in Franklin a level of surety on what will happen to the fabric of their village. So this council notes the following. The historic village of Franklin is a significant visual asset to the Huon Valley community. The previous previous commissioned council work by heritage consultant Graham Corney recommends the urban growth boundary would be more appropriately somewhere around the 20-metre contour line. The unreasonable scale of the investigation area, given the surrounding road assets that would service potentially over 100 lots, and a reasonable view of the development interests of impacted landholders should be taken into account, and the present petition should be considered as part of the Ludds process. So I'd just like to move that amendment.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that amendment, please? Yes, Councillor Armstrong. Now, do you wish to speak any further on that, Councillor Jessup?
Yes, Mayor, just briefly. As I said, I will be moving something more definitive around that, but I have actually listened to a number of presentations around Franklin at the LPS process. Yeah, and I've also listened to the discussions we've had around the Cygnet town site and around roads around the Cygnet town site. So I'm quite comfortable with that. As a council, we are making decisions around townships at this point in time. That said, I'm also very conscious of the process around having a Ludds, but I'm comfortable with what I've raised here, that these are all considerations that the councillors have at one stage or another mentioned, and I believe we're of a position that with this motion and with another motion in the 35F stage, we can actually make a determination on the immediate development around Franklin. And I don't think that's stepping too far outside of the Ludds process. And I also think, as one of the questions raised, is it is an opportune time to get this processed as part of the LPS. I think the commissioners have been quite open in listening to both council, consultant and ratepayer representation. So I think it will not significantly disrail the Ludds process, but I think it will just bring this issue to a close and we can all move on. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Do I have anyone with a question to the amendment? Yes, Councillor Canberra-Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. At present, no decision has been made to extend the urban growth boundary. It's only been identified as an investigation area, and that's only in the draft land use and development discussion paper and the technical appendices. So I think the petition is premature, and I think a decision of the nature that Councillor Jessup is suggesting is also premature. The land has been zoned as rural under the draft local provision schedule, which would give Mr Johnson considerable freedom to manage his land as he wishes. I believe that as a planning authority, we are obliged and should expect expert advice on decisions of this nature. And that expert advice would come through the processes that are currently ongoing, which is the land use and development strategy and also the local provision schedules hearings. To accept something on the lines of what's been suggested will be setting a precedent such that anyone else seeking to circumvent the processes could petition council to make an early decision on their case. And I think we could rightly be subject to an accusation of poor governance, i.e. making decisions on the fly, while there are ongoing processes that we've all agreed to abide by that are intended to resolve all such issues in a holistic manner across the municipality. And I do also have some concerns about some of the proposals as well about extending, for instance, rural living, except in a minority of situations, since they're expensive to buy, expensive to run, and equally expensive for council to service. They're completely out of reach financially for anyone growing up now in the valley or for the skilled workers we badly need in hospitality, aged care, which is our biggest employment sector after aquaculture, in agriculture and so on. They're discouraged by both the new Tasmanian planning policies and the Southern Tasmanian land use strategy, which are overarching documents intended to guide our LPS and LUDS work. They're also difficult to environment and they fragment productive land. And for all the reasons above, I reject the amendment and support the original officer motion.
Thank you for that. Have I got anyone else that would like to speak? Yes, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor. I can understand exactly what Councillor Camber-Smith is saying, but I also understand what Councillor Jessup's saying, and I think the problem is that these issues have been going on for quite a while. It comes down to really how do we tell people what they can and can't do with their land? But even if we were to somehow modify some sort of, like this petition, this arrangement of land, there's still going to be a restriction on that land. There's still going to be uses that it will be allowable for. It's not just free for all, do what you want with that land. Those things have been sitting around for quite a while, and there needs to be some finish off point to this at some stage. It's probably previous to all the planning schemes and the zoning changes. It was still the same as what it is now. It's just now being told that, we have to use it for a different use. But in reality, it's still the same land as what it was 50 years ago. So as long as it has a criteria that it can be used, but careful of what it can't be used for, I think it should be hastened along. It has been going for a while. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Temby.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand also what Councillor Camber-Smith has been saying, but I think that there's a lot more to it than that. And if we're going to talk about poor governance, well, the fact that we're doing this LPS and having these hearings before we do our land use strategy is poor governance. So, we're talking about people that have put their life on hold for 10 years. And what Councillor Jessup's motion simply says is that council notes that the historic village of Franklin is significant. As he read, it's only saying, asking that that this process takes note that council sees that these points are important, and the investigation area. We're talking about an area that doesn't have the infrastructure. I don't know what further information you need to gather, what more expert advice you need, when you know that those two roads, New Road and Old Road, are narrow. We don't have water or sewerage on that area. So I don't know what further information the experts need to actually understand that, you know, this is not a good area for urban growth zone. So, and further, as far as setting a precedent, I also like to point out that I attended the hearings on the 4th of July, and there were other precedents that have already been set where they've changed their mind and they have considered presentations that have come along and said, I'm a farmer, I know what I'm doing with my land, I don't want to have LCZ, for example, I would like to have split zoning, and they have accommodated that. So we have already had precedents where the concern, and this is what we're trying to do with land use strategies, is consider the concerns of the community, and that's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. Do I have any other? No? Yes?
Just briefly in response to that, the hearings are not making decisions, they're making recommendations at this stage. So none of that will be settled until we actually hear the full report in December.
Yes.
So it's not true to say they're making decisions, they might be making recommendations, and they might also change, you know, as things proceed. So I think it is circumventing that process, and we're not, you know, we're considering this as a petition, not as a planning authority, and I don't think we should be, you know, jumping the gun on these things.
Thank you. Okay. Would you like to close?
Yes, if everybody's finished.
Yep.
Don't worry, Councillor, we will get to the Planning Authority section soon. You know, ultimately this is the right time to do this because three wise men who come down from Hobart a number of times are sitting in this room, and they are ultimately the people who will make a decision on the our planning scheme. We do not make that decision, but the very highly paid individuals are coming to do that. I absolutely agree that we need a diversity of housing for the aged, for the working poor and so forth, but that also includes blocks where people are going to spend money and build bigger houses and live with large families and all those sort of things. So, you know, Franklin is always going to be a high value area, I would think, given its nature and proximity to the river. So I'm not sure that that's a sound argument, but all I'm really saying here is we're accepting the petition, and we are basically saying that we're effectively acknowledging the issues that the petition have raised, and as I said, I'm foreshadowing some changes later where I may actually make a planning recommendation. But I urge councillors simply to acknowledge what is I think fairly obvious to most of us, that the Franklin issue needs to be resolved and moved on. Thank you.
So I'll put that. All those in favour of the amended motion, please raise your hand. That's Councillor Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup, Temby, O'Neill and Doyle. And against is Burgess and Camber-Smith. Sorry. That the council is acting as a planning authority at... Thank you. In accordance with the provisions of Part 2 Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015, the Council will now act as a planning authority pursuant to the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993. In accordance with Regulation 25, the Council will act as a planning authority in respect of those matters appearing under Item 10 of this agenda, inclusive of any supplementary items. Agenda item number 10.012/23, planning application, subdivision sub 30/2022, 6 lot subdivision, 5 new and balance, and associated infrastructure works at 176 and 166 Glen Road, Ranelagh, CT 180090/1 and CT 151240/4 and Crown Road Reserve. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion, please? Councillor Camber-Smith. Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Camber-Smith, would you like to speak to the motion?
I think this is a perfectly valid application. Seems very sensible, reasonable use of space. It's good to see vacant residential land actually being used and developed. I can understand the concerns of the residents at 26 Kellaway Street, but I assume they knew the land alongside them was zoned residential and therefore subject to development at some stage, and I'm fully supportive of the motion.
Thank you. What am I up to now? Sorry, I'm about to cough. Is there anyone that would like to speak against the motion? No? Is there anyone to speak for the motion, or do you want to speak, ask a question? No? Okay, all right. Do you want to close, Councillor Camber-Smith?
Nothing further to say, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda number 10.013/23, report under section 35F of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 on representations received by the Planning Authority following exhibition of the draft Huon Valley Local Provisions Schedule LPS/HUO/TPS. I refer councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Jessup, do I have a seconder? Is that's the, what's the motion? No? Sorry? Oh, yes, I've got to go through this now, don't I? Yes, sorry. Yep, okay, and then that one. Yep, down that way. Okay, thank you. Okay. With the councillor interests having been identified with regards to individual submissions within the Section 35F report amendment, the Mayor will take the direction in the following groups. 10.013/23, that the report under, I've done that one, haven't I? It's A. Yep. Councillor Thorpe and that there, yeah, and then we go into that one. Okay, sorry guys. 10.013/23, a recommendation that the report under Section 35 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for consideration of representations received by the Planning Authority following exhibition of the draft Huon Valley Local Provisions Schedule LPS HUO TPS be received and noted. Do I have a councillor to move that section, please? Councillor Temby and Councillor Armstrong. And then I can go straight into the next bit. Do we have to vote on that? Okay. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. So then we go to Direction 3 /21st of June 2023, Amy Robinson for Troy Corbell. So I have Councillor Thorpe and Burgess have declared an interest in that. So will you please leave the room? Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Yep.
Through you, Mayor, just the purpose of assisting the meeting and saving you some voice. The recommendation is equivalent to B, C, D, E and F of the recommendation, but only relating to direction 3. So the I don't think we've had an opportunity to circulate, have we?
No.
For a point of clarification, Mayor, we're going through the ones where there's a conflict of interest and then you do the rest of the...
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
So the first motion, Mayor, is that in respect of direction... sorry, that A is not supposed to be there.
Yep.
In respect of direction 3, the addendum to the report under section 35F of the Land Use Planning Approvals Act for consideration of representations in attachment A received by Planning Authority following exhibition of draft Huon Valley Local Provisions Schedule included in attachment A to this report, and it may or may not be amended, be endorsed, and all other paragraphs are referenced to direction 3 only.
Okay. Yep. All right. Do you, I now ask for someone to move that. So yes, Councillor Armstrong and Councillor. Yep. Jessup. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Armstrong? No. Okay. Have I got any other questions on how that's been done? Everyone right? Yep. Okay. You don't wish to close? Okay. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's Councillor Armstrong, Jessup, Temby, Cambersmith, O'Neill and Doyle. And if you can ask the other two to come back in, please. Do you want to read that one as well?
Okay. The next direction is direction 39. Councillor Jessup has declared an interest in this matter, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jessup.
As is the case with the last motion, Mayor, the motion is in respect of direction 39 only.
Do I have a councillor to move that direction number 39 motion, please? Councillor Armstrong and Councillor O'Neill. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Armstrong? Do I have any queries on that one? Yes, Councillor Cambersmith.
Thank you. I reject many of the statements made in this particular submission, and I will also be applying personally to the TPC to have this submission disallowed owing to defamatory comments, accusations and potentially unlawful actions by some of the representatives listed to this particular submission.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, do I have anyone else to speak or no? Okay, I'll put that forward for direction 39, 39, sorry. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Oh, you've got a question, okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Mayor. I just had a thought process whilst I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
Could you explain yourself a little bit further, Jen? Councillor Cambersmith.
Some of the submissions published on the TPC website that have been authorised by members of the HVZA are defamatory against me and untrue, so I will be raising those and complaining about them. And I'd prefer not to go into the unlawful actions in this particular forum.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it becomes personal, so
It,
we don't
absolutely, but I'm just sort
It's
of
not
thinking.
personal, it's
No,
it is
no,
unlawful
no. But I
action,
just want a clarification. But I'm also now wondering if that would affect how we would see that. Like if Jenny's making, Councillor Camber-Smith is making a statement about something, we're asked to vote on it. Should we investigate that a bit further before we vote on it?
The Director of Legal and Governance is aware of my
So I think it
issues.
will take its...
And I need to raise it personally with the TPC because it's not really a planning authority issue. It's a matter that that needs to be addressed by the Planning Commission and the hearings process.
But if the planning...
Basically, there's statements in a submission, more than one submission on the TPC website that state that I'd ignored advice given by the Director of Legal and Governance when I had not, and a couple of other issues related to that.
But it hasn't affected what's actually been written about this. It's just more or less against what you've said.
But I think it goes to the legitimacy of the people who've written the submission and the lengths they will go to undermine and to pursue their ideology against LCZ.
Right, so is there a shade of grey here? That's what I want to know. Like, I don't think that I can vote on this if I don't know about this properly.
So you're telling me now then that you don't want to move this?
Well, I didn't know about that information.
I didn't know until yesterday.
So can you just hold on a moment, please?
Sorry, that was just a bit of a surprise. Because I'm not exactly sure now what I would be moving.
Can I just clarify what you mean?
Okay, we'll just clarify something for you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, just for the purpose of clarification, if you go to representation 39, which is across a number of pages, finishing on page 13 of the attachments, the recommended action is no modification of the draft LPS is required.
Okay. Okay, so it's just a personal thing really, so that's fine. Okay, let's go back to the original. Me doing this.
Okay, so
I'm sorry.
all
that happened
those
to
in
you, Jen.
favour of the recommendation, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried.
Sorry, Mayor.
It's fine. Okay, could you please ask Councillor Jessup if he can Councillor Jessup return, please? Thank you. Next we have Direction 41 and Direction 42, and we have an interest of Councillor Camber-Smith. Thank you. You want to do that?
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, it's the same as the previous motion, but specifically in relation to directions 41 and 42. And there is provision if there are any amendments proposed in this.
So do I have a councillor to move the motion of Direction 41 and 42? 42, please. Councillor Jessup and Councillor Temby, thank you. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Jessup?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to amend it. So when would be the appropriate time to do that?
Through you, Mayor, now as part of the motion.
Yeah, now part of the motion.
So I'm assuming that I would move an amendment to change the report. Matt, is that the... Yep. So the amendment that I'd like to move, and by a very simple way of history, these were in the original LPS, they were rural. An individual landholder, for their own personal reasons, moved a motion, put in a representation to change that. Unbeknownst to the owners then represented to the Commission and the Commission has kicked it back to us to sort out. That's a very polite way of putting it. My view is that the Planning Authority response, and Matt, you've got this wording for your assistance. This is the one I sent you in the draft LPS with lots of edit marks in it.
What time did you send that?
I can resend it to you. Basically, yeah. So I'll just quickly send it to Matt. Did I include you, Matt, in the original? I think I did. Yep. So I've very kindly rewritten the 35 the report for you, and on page 20, I've suggested the Planning Authority response be changed to the land is surrounded by properties largely zoned rural under the proposed LPS. Land to the east and adjoining Russell Ridge Conservation Area is zoned LCZ. The properties have been variously cleared over time. The properties hold no landscape features that are particular noteworthy. The vegetation cover can be protected by a priority vegetation overlay. And then the recommendation would be, basically, I'm assuming that the recommendation would be to return to the original LPS recommendation of rural. Are you happy with that, Matt, as a wording? Because I do recognise there is certain language requirements in this.
Mayor, just simply put to rezone to rural.
Yep, cool. And then for the next one down, which is 42, again, and look, I've had the opportunity to listen to Mr. Smutney's daughter. Mr. Smutney's an ageing man of European descent, and his daughter was quite kind enough to come in and represent for him. He's quite strongly opposed to the rezoning. So I'm suggesting a change there, which I'll read, which, Matt, I hope you do have. But the site is zoned rural resource under the interim planning scheme, rural in the draft LPS. The land does not reach the 80% native vegetation coverage, but was considered in the 35F report to be zoned landscape conservation due to being steep and contributing to a larger contiguous bushland area connected to the Russell Ridge Conservation Area. Parts of the land are generally cleared on the lower part of the site and contain buildings and infrastructure. Split zoning south of the 340 metre contour was considered to be zoned rural and the remainder zoned landscape conservation. But this runs a risk of creating spot zoning depending on other Commission decisions. So the recommendation, therefore, we move to that the entire title be zoned rural, but split rural zoning from the 340 contour may be acceptable solution depending on the final Commission decisions on other nearby representations. So I think, yeah, there is some, it's a complex block, but I've heard a number of representations from around that particular block, and it's not clear that a lot of them won't go back to rural. So I think we kick that half back to the Commission. But yeah, my view is it should be rural, but if they decide it's split zoned, that is an option.
Okay. Now, do I have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Burgess. Do you wish to speak more, Councillor Jessup, or you think you've done enough?
I'll close later.
Okay. Do we have anyone else to speak on this? No? Okay. Do you want to close? Okay. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's Councillor Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup, Burgess, O'Neill and Doyle. And those against is Councillor Temby. Thank you. You can ask Councillor Cameron Smith to come back in. That'd be good. And then we go. Okay, thank you. So now we have, I need a councillor to move. We've got the direction 37, 38, 40, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 75, 76, 77, 81, 83, and then direction 1, 2, 3, and then again 1, 2. Do I have a councillor at 10.013/23, sorry. Do I have a councillor to move those? Yes, Councillor Jessup. Do I have a set? Does that what motion are you amend?
Well, that's a jolly good question. I'd probably suggest if it works procedurally to... thank you, Mayor. I think I'd suggest procedurally to move the whole lot, but can we then maybe do a bit of a straw poll through each one? Because I have some other amendments, surprisingly. I don't know how you want to deal with that.
I have no idea how we actually go through that process. However, it would be best to discuss what the changes are before the motion is formally put.
Would you like to...
I can give an
yes.
overview.
Yep.
So the overview is to add a preamble which talks about the motion we moved in May and the food strategy. I think I'm now getting the hint that there probably should be another issue called the Franklin Urban Development Area, which has a few words in it. And then going through them, and I'll just scan down and tell you which ones I wanted to raise some issues with. And I must admit, while I'm scanning, I do commend the volume of work that the Director Grimsey's team has been doing with this work, and these are only the fringe of the directions that they've had to deal with. Okay, and there's one, but we've dealt with that one. Dealt with that one. Yeah, this has been an extremely wearing process for council staff, and I do acknowledge all that work. Gee, Matt, you might be in luck, and I think I might have almost run out of... Oh, no, here we go. Here's one. So, thank you. So, the Direction 48, Robert and Thula K. McKenna. The nature of this one, look, I'm actually going to suggest that this is a block of land that's literally 2 properties before Orchard Road, right on the way into Huonville. So it's a prime piece of real estate for our community. And I do acknowledge the protection of the agricultural land behind the area is quite important. But my suggestion is, should we talk to the landholder about some options here? And one option might be to do some split zone along the front of it to allow residential, or even to make it all rural. So, as I say, if somebody wants to build some sort of processing plant for juniper berries or something like that as a tourism venture, they can do that. But under agriculture, which is what it's proposed to, that really excludes the processing of stuff. So it actually turns it into a fairly limited piece of land. So that was really one, and I have a couple of comments on the mining tenements. I think a couple of them should stay rural. And I have a comment on 77. 172 Goodwins Road. Again, that's a partially cleared urban living block, which I'm proposing should be rural. And
So the mining ones, you mean the state growth ones?
yes, there's two there. I can find that if you want. There's two there that I believe the two middle ones, which should stay rural, I think. That is number. I'll come back to that when Matt tells us how to deal with it.
Would we need to know which ones before we do the amendment?
Yes. Okay, let me just find that. I'll open. That would be.
My egg timer for you.
This is just talking about the motion to start with.
Yeah.
Why I'm talking about it, yeah. That would be lease 1148P, which is large in a rural area. It's proposed for landscape conservation, and Councillor Armstrong was right onto it for me. That should remain rural. And the other one that I believe also is largely surrounded by rural land, which is 1915P. Again proposed to landscape conservation, but should remain rural. Then I go to 83, which is Angelo Kesarios in Glen Huon Road. And some advice, when we looked at environmental living, Mr Grimsey, that could either go to rural living or landscape conservation, couldn't it, as an option, I recall?
Through you, Mayor, potentially.
Yeah. So officers have chosen landscape conservation. I actually think, given the surrounding land, it's probably closer to rural, if anything. There's mostly rural blocks. It's a reasonable size block. And I'm pretty sure that was it. There was a little bit of confusion around Mr Bartell's property. I don't know what we were actually asking for there, if we were asking to remove the biodiversity scheme or not, but it looked to me that it could still be used for building anyway, so it looked like it was probably a moot point to discuss, I think. So I didn't see a way that we could do anything that would make it easier. Yeah. So they're just my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
So, before I get to you, Jenny, before I get to you, Jenny, have you got those amendments?
I do.
Yep. Yep.
There are two, which I probably won't be able to. Microphone's not on. I do have those amendments, Mayor. There are two amendments which I need to find, which don't actually have changes. They just have some thoughts. Representation or Direction 83. The comment that is noted in there says not sure about this one.
So 83 is the one that I think probably should go to rural. That was the environmental living versus. So I'm happy to change that to this should be rural.
Okay. And the other one.
I think the other one was probably the Huon Highway one, I would think, was it?
I think that was the one.
And I'm sort of really, look, I'm not opposed to it being agriculture, but I suppose I was throwing it open to the council as to, are we happy to let a prime piece of real estate like that be locked up as agriculture, or is that something we should add to the LUD's discussion about being that whole entry space into the township of Huonville. What do we want to do with that?
So do you want to put it into there, or you want to not?
Are we going to vote on this as an omnibus motion or as individual things?
No, we're moving it as a block,
Single?
aren't we? As a block.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put it into rural then.
Okay. All right. Do I have a seconder for the amended? Yes, Councillor Armstrong. Spoke enough, Councillor Jessup, or would you like to speak some more?
Put it that way, man. How could I resist? Councillors have the wording of the preamble, but just for the purpose of the public gallery, I suppose all I'm saying in the preamble there is acknowledging that we are in the middle of a LUD's process, but as we come to decisions, I think it is useful that the Commission knows what we're thinking. So I've suggested that we reference the Huon Valley Food Resilience Strategy, which I believe might already have gone, but I think that's an important strategic document that we need to formally submit. We did try to give it to the Commission, but they said unless you formally submit it, we're not going to read it. So this makes them read it. And then we had a motion back in May that was passed, 13.008, which was another long motion of mine, which sort of preambled the rural living discussion. So again, it's putting that in as a preamble. And then the Franklin one, I think I'll just put something there that says Franklin Urban Development Area. The Council, having considered the interests of the Franklin community, recommends that whatever you want to call it, the Franklin urban growth boundary be limited to around the 20-metre contour line. 2, land between the around the 60-metre to 20-metre contour line be considered for rural A, and land above the 60-metre immediately behind the township of Franklin be considered for rural living B and or landscape conservation. Noting that by saying rural living A, somebody could still subdivide it to be rural living B or C size blocks. I don't have to, but it gives us flexibility to develop that, because I think that just resolves that issue. And then the other ones, as I've mentioned.
Okay. So before I open it up to the floor, the Director's going to offer some advice.
So through you, Mayor, there's been no advice provided in relation to the Franklin Urban Development Area, whilst the matter of the urban growth boundary and the contour has been discussed in the context of the architect and heritage consultant in relation to Franklin. The second proposal, land between around the 60-metre and 20-metre contour line, be considered for rural living A, is actually inconsistent with that same report. He's quoted here, one of the key recommendations of my 2012 report was that zoning should specifically prohibit further residential subdivisions on the Western Hills overlooking Franklin. To clarify any misinterpretation, I meant zoning should specifically prohibit further residential subdivision on the hills overlooking Franklin. So that advice being accepted for the purpose of the 20-metre contour is contrary to a rural living A zone which allows subdivision down to 1 hectare. I can also advise that the existing rural living, which is on the southern side of Old Road, is actually rural living D.
So what's the advice? Let it be D?
Through Mayor, the advice would be rural living D.
Which is what size?
Up 10 hectares.
Where are my friends? No, I'm happy to continue at that, and we can make that decision. And ultimately, it is up to the Commission. They can ignore me or not.
Okay, so do I have a seconder for that? Councillor O'Neill? Oh, you spoke. Yep. Okay. You had your hand up, Councillor Cammersmith.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a bit to say, so please bear with me.
That's fine.
Councillor Jessup proposes to prefix our Section 35F report addendum today with a motion passed by a majority a couple of meetings ago. I'd like to remind councillors that that motion was not passed while acting as a planning authority, and in fact we specifically removed the reference to a planning authority from that motion. And my comment also goes to pertains to one of the questions on notice that we received this morning. We spent a considerable time as a council discussing and workshopping the preamble and the principles we wrote for our original 35F report. They were a good compromise. It kept to the principles of the hearings, making changes by exception, i.e. where a representative provides new evidence to show that we have made an error of fact, or where an existing use is in conflict with the proposed zone, or where split zoning might better provide a compromise between the representative's use and the protection of natural assets. Some of the reverses that we're suggesting in this document today to the original planning authority decision in their original Section 35A report appear to be perverse and are not following the principles we workshopped as a planning authority, the guidelines issued by the TCP, or based on any new evidence given by the representative. We are obliged to make rational, logical decisions as a planning authority which are not based on emotion or our own preferences. That means following the guidance and the expert guidance handed down to us by the State Planning Office and the Tasmanian Planning Commission, and that given to us by our own internal processes, including our own directors. We can't just decide to do our own thing and bow to the unremitting pressure of people who are ideologically opposed to the landscape conservation zone, or who think we should create many more 5-acre rural living blocks. Just to remind you, Section 8A, Guideline Number 1, with respect to the landscape conservation zone, says it LCZ may be applied to B, land that has significant constraints on development through the application of the Natural Assets Code or Scenic Protection Code. Most of those, submissions that we're looking at today are covered by significant restrictive codes, natural asset codes, natural hazards codes such as landslip or the Scenic Protection Code. Also, with respect to the rural zone, RZ1 says the rural zone should be applied to non-urban areas, blah, 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 which are not more appropriately included within the landscape conservation zone or the environmental management zone for the protection of specific values. At no point in any of the guidance are landscape values defined as being visible or on a skyline. In fact, logic suggests the more remote a property is, the harder it will be to service as a rural or a rural living zone property, and the more likely it is to have ecological and biodiversity values which fit within the landscape conservation zone. Yet, the proposal today, and also those of other arguments within the submissions we're looking at today, consistently use the argument that their property is not visible from a road as an argument against the application of the landscape conservation zone. Just to remind councillors as well of the new State Planning Provisions Review issues Consultation Scoping Report, which is the very latest advice we've had from the State Planning Office. Key principles for reviewing the state planning provisions and assessing potential changes to planning regulations are, and it includes, in the hierarchy of planning controls, zoning is the primary mechanism for managing use and development in conjunction with codes and LPS provisions, i.e. we cannot just rely on codes and overlays to provide the protections that we are seeking, for instance, when we're applying rural with a wide slather brush, which we seem to be wanting to do at the moment. And looking at the submissions in some detail, 3880 Huon Highway, looking at the aerial maps, the area within the current environmental living zone is almost entirely covered in tree canopy and native bush, and the priority vegetation overlay covers almost all the native vegetation on the site. Therefore, it quite clearly does not fit within the rural zone guidelines. 184 Lanes Road, Glenhuon. 2/3 of the property is covered in native vegetation and a biodiversity overlay. Therefore, for consistency, it should be split zoned between LCZ and rural, not changed completely to rural. That type of split zoning is fully consistent with the principles we brainstormed and appended to the original 35F report we submitted to the Commission. I've already talked about the Huon Valley Zoning Association submission. 21 Grandmere Road, Woodstock. Again, this property is almost entirely covered in tree canopy. It's on a 10 to 20 degree slope, almost completely within the landslip hazard zone, and almost completely covered in a biodiversity overlay. There is absolutely no logic and no guidance that supports the application of the rural zone to this block. It goes completely against the Section 8A guidelines. 5 Liddles Road. Again, no justification for split zoning here. Only a tiny element, about 5% of the area is cleared. Almost 95% of the area is under a biodiversity overlay, as well as other restrictive overlays, including 11 to 20 degree landslip hazard and waterway and coastal protection. 264 Cloverside, Lukeston.
Are you going to go through all of them?
No, I've got 2 more.
Right.
And let's remind ourselves that Councillor Jessup spoke for about 15 minutes.
I wasn't going to ask you to stop.
I know, I'm sorry.
Yes.
The representative, 264 Cloverside, Lukeston. The representative says their property is not visible, yet it lies entirely within a scenic protection overlay. Most of it is in the landslip 11 to 20 degree landslip hazard band, and half of it is under a biodiversity layer. Hence, split zoning would be more consistent with the principles that we brainstormed and agreed. We've stuck to our guns on 136 Rocky Creek Road, thankfully, but then we've used quite the same logic to come up with quite a different conclusion on some of the others. We've stuck with 172 Goodwins Road, Woodstock, which I'm thankful for. And I should also point out that 214 Loon River Road, which we've suggested to go, I think, to rural living, also sits entirely within the biodiversity overlay, completely within the biodiversity overlay. So I actually think we're starting to allow our hearts to rule our heads, and I also feel that the officers in the TPC hearings are bowing to pressure and, may I say it, almost bullying, rather than sticking to the principles that we've agreed as a planning authority. So I would actually like to make quite different amendments as those I've just stated.
So you're moving...
Speaking it against.
Against, but are you moving...
I'm foreshadowing a
Foreshadowing.
amendment.
Do you is there a seconder for Councillor Canberra-Smith's foreshadow? No?
No, you don't need that.
Don't need it? Okay. So... Oh, by councillor. Okay. All right. Councillor Jessup, do you wish to speak? No?
Nobody else?
Close?
No, I'll just quickly close.
Anyone else? Oh, is anybody
yeah.
else that wants to? Yeah. Anyone else?
I think I've worn them down, bullied them down.
Yeah.
Look, I think just in closing, I've largely accepted the recommendations of the officer here, and I think there's a nice balance in some of those things that have been said. The commissioners have been very responsive and have asked questions that clearly show that these are complex issues and they are grappling with the complexity of what's there and dealing with rules that are open to interpretation. I've heard planners on both sides of the ecological fence giving quite different statements on the one submission. So there is no right or wrong answers here. At the heart of this, as a planning authority, we are representing the people of the Huon Valley and wanting to reinforce the planning principles that our ratepayers largely hold dear. And I do think things like biodiversity overlays, and this has been repeated by the commissioners repeatedly, if it's only a protection of species or treed areas, biodiversity overlays are appropriate, and our council officers do enforce them and fine people for doing the wrong thing. So I think I think my amendments strike a balance and clear up a few things where I think there probably is some opportunity to do it slightly differently. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put the amended motion forward. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's Councillor. Yeah.
So I've got confused there for a minute.
Yeah, no. Councillor Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup, Burgess and O'Neill. And against is Councillor Temby and Hammersmith. The motion is carried. I'd just like to thank Matthew for his typing there and getting us through that, because that wasn't an easy task. The Mayor will advise that the Council is no longer acting as a planning authority at... 7:29. Do we have to...
Well, it was yeah,
it's not... Yeah.
It's not relevant, yeah.
General reports. Are there any councillors tabling their activities tonight?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, yes. Would any councillor like to speak to those? Yeah.
Mayor, I note that you and Councillor Thorpe was also at the Huon Show opening of their new Founders building. I'm glad I remembered that. Yeah, the Huon Show's been going for nigh on 80 years now. They managed to get some funding from the federal government, a specific show grant funding bucket, that they've developed a new cattle shed and new storage shed, and yeah, it just further adds to the utility of that largely council-owned site that they've built on their own block next door. But it, well done to a society that I was a proud president of at one stage to keep moving forward and keep having faith that post-COVID they can run events and service our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have a councillor to move a motion that the general reports and minutes for the period 1 to 30th June 2023 be received and noted? Councillor Armstrong, and a seconder, Councillor Thorpe. Do any of the wish to speak? To anyone ask a question or wish to speak? Do any of the committee members like to talk about any of those?
I just have a question, Mayor, about the quick grants.
Yeah.
On how they're acquitted, and do we just give a check over and that's it, or is there an acquittal process in the closing of those grants?
I can pass that through the GM through to the acting director, if that's okay.
Yeah, so there is an acquittal process that is followed.
Thank you. Do I have any other? Yes, Councillor Temby.
Just briefly, thank you very much for the reports. Just quickly, the Huonville roundabout was mentioned in the Arts and Culture Committee minutes, draft minutes, and some time ago the Huon Valley Garden Club offered to plant flowers in the roundabout. I just wondered if there was an opportunity there for them to get together with the Arts and Culture Committee, who obviously are interested in beautification of the roundabout.
Okay, thank you. Can I come back to maybe take that one on notice, if that's, yeah, can I take that on notice, please? I do know there's some things that are happening through there, but with Councillor Gibson, his arts and culture is, yeah. So we'll take that one on notice and come back to you if that's okay. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Campbell-Smith.
Thanks, Matt. I think you mentioned about a possible meeting with the Dark Lab Transformer people about some of the concerns raised when we were considering the DA. I wondered if you'd update us on what's happening there.
And from our activity statements, from where we'd been through, where we'd been had a meeting with Dark Lab, is that what you meant?
And whether there'll be a follow-up meeting where we might all have an opportunity to put forward queries that you could convey on our behalf.
Yep, yeah. I know that they will be meeting with us all steps of the way. They have stated that they will work with councillors, and so they're more than willing to and will definitely meet with all councillors. Yeah.
Perhaps they would be willing to come in and give a presentation to us at some time or some point or something to give us a chance to question them on some of the issues.
Can I, your view on that one, General Manager? You're under the same view as I, that they are there to work with us. They do want to work through any of the issues. One of the things I know that you, just for the animals, I forwarded them through the bit last week in the UN News from the protection of the, make sure you know, careful of animals on the roads. So they are very mindful of those things, and yes, I will ask them, can we have a meeting when they can come down
the road, perhaps.
Yep. No problems.
I think we can just clarify that they are still waiting on their approval.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, do I have any other to speak? No? Yep. Yes, Councillor.
I was looking where I saw this, but I just want to make a note of thanks to see that the little area over here across the road next to the hub looks like it's almost finished. So it'd be lovely to get rid of that fencing and be able to sit on those lovely new seats there.
Maybe we could make a little stage for you over there, Councillor Jessup.
A fruit box will be fine there.
Yeah.
Speaker's corner.
Yeah. So, So, if there's no other questions or any comments, yes.
Yeah,
sorry.
I just wanted to thank the officers for a very comprehensive natural resource management report in here.
Too.
Yeah, and they seem to do an extraordinary amount for a very small, understaffed unit. So, congratulations, and also on the the tourism branding work as well.
Yes.
I mean, these general reports often we just okay them, but it's evidence of a great amount of work going on in the background that isn't always acknowledged.
No, thank you. Thanks for that. That's good. Okay. So we'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors. And the motion is carried. Councillor workshops. General Manager, would you like to advise on some of the workshops that were held, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mayor. So on the 5th of July, we had a visit from the Southern Tasmanian Regional Waste Authority. So the CEO and the Chair of the authority provided us an update on this newly formed authority. We had some discussion around and a presentation on discussion around the resource and structure review update and what the next steps are. On the 12th of July, we had Taswater visit us regarding the Geeveston Outfall Relocation Project and provide an update on the project and answered some councillor questions. We also had the Governance Strategy and Sustainable Development Services team lead us through discussion around the future of local government review and the draft report and submission that is before us today. And on the 19th of July, The Tasmanian Police Inspector Colin Riley provided an update to councillors on topics such as the antisocial behaviour and illegal rubbish dumping. And finally, we had the strategic projects for inclusion in our election strategy. So we led discussion just around some draft projects for council there as well.
Thank you. 13.1, councillor questions on notice. There was no councillor questions taken on notice, but from the June meeting, we have given the answers to Councillor Temby's questions there, so they are in the paperwork. So 13.2, questions without notice. Councillors, are there any questions without notice? Yes, Councillor Hammersmith.
Thank you. I've got 4, if that's okay. I'm keen to get, I know it's early days, but I'm quite keen to get some idea of the project timetable for this financial year, particularly with regard to when we might be starting and possibly finishing on some of the projects that we've talked about, such as the planning customer experience review that's been ongoing, the medical centre refurbishment, aquatic review, rates review, retirement homes review, etc. How are the projects being prioritised? How are we deciding, which to do first? And will there be a sort of estimated programme or schedule of work, if you like, be provided to councillors at some stage?
Can I pass that one through to you, General Manager?
Of course. So largely, they're going to be moving forward concurrently. So they're not going to be a sequential, in a sense. So as we've highlighted, the Children's Services Strategy Review has now had a consultant engaged, and they're expecting to complete the work in August. Okay. The Retirement Villages Strategy Review will be completed, has a consultant, a separate consultant, progressing that one, and that should be completed by the end of September. Our customer experience for development applications project, we're looking to have something in Q1. We are just waiting on some information around plan build and sort of some more finer points around the processes, but largely that's what we're targeting. The aquatic facilities review, we're looking to come back to councillors by the end of October with a workshop. The medical centre refurbishment is planned for completion in late November. These are all obviously subject to all of the things going to plan, but largely that's what we're looking at. We do provide an update on these projects, and I noted when I had a look through the quarter implementation report that we have some of the timelines in there. It was more backward looking than forward looking, so we'll look to make sure we include those in that quarterly update for you, so that
terrific.
you
Thank
stay
you.
across those as well.
Excellent, thank you. Will we be reintroducing bulk billing to the medical centres, and what difference might that make to our bottom line, given the increased Medicare refund now available?
Yeah, do you want to come over?
Sorry.
So at the moment, the actual detailed information on what those changes are, so we obviously heard the announcement around tripling of incentives, bulk billing incentives, and potentially some item numbers increasing. The details are still being released, and we're still trying to understand, because it's a very complex process, and I won't go into it, but there's also indexing and other matters that also impact the final amount that one would get for particular item numbers. Now there are pages of item numbers, from standard consults, long consults, etc., etc. So at this stage, there's not enough information for us to make a definitive call on whether we are going to go back to bulk billing or not, but we are constantly looking at it, and as we get new information, we are then informing our modelling on that.
Okay, thank you. I might have known it wouldn't be made simple. And I'd very much like to ask if we could please have an update and a workshop on, what's been happening on the TPC hearings and the likely outcomes and timescales and the ramifications of what, the impact on council and LUDS process, etc., on anticipated zone changes and what they might mean with respect to additional infrastructure requirements or other impacts on council. Would it be possible to schedule a workshop on that whole area at some?
Okay, can I pass that through to
Through
you?
you, Mayor, we can, finding in the schedule an opportunity to have a workshop just to give a briefing on it. There is a bit of a difficulty having a workshop on what's additional infrastructure requirements and other impacts on council, because until the TPC has made its decision, it's very speculative as to what all those changes are going to be. So at the moment, it's expected that the TPC may give a decision December, January, but it's entirely in their hands. So it'd be more appropriate for that particular workshop to be held after the TPC's made that decision and given clear directions, but we can give an update before then.
Thank you. And I guess it's just because we are making some decisions on the fly, with respect to increasing things like rural living, and I think it'd be useful to know, to hear what what impacts they might have or might present council with respect to, road upgrades and all that sort of thing. Just lastly, I'm sorry, I didn't have an opportunity to foreshadow this one, but I just it was brought to my attention that we're advertising for a new GP to join the medical centres, and the salary appears to be in the range 400 to 500,000. That just seems an awful lot. Perhaps somebody can shed light on whether that's
that wasn't our job, was it?
It said Huon Valley.
Okay.
But if that's wrong, I might be wrong. It was
I'd have to take that on notice.
Yeah, okay. I'll send the link to you, and you can hopefully it is. Yeah, because that was rather. I do hope not.
But that is if that's the go for the doctor, that's the go. But
I
that
know.
was
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
No worries at all. Do I have somebody else with some questions without notice?
Mayor, I have just a quick one, and I know this will come up in the Jobs Hub, but I'll preempt it. There was a line entry in there, results for 48,000 for consultants and accounting. Now, I know accountants are paid a lot of money, but I find that even hard to pay that much for them. So could you give us a bit of an indication of what consultancies they may have been using and how they're maybe contributing to the work of the Jobs Hub? Thank you.
Through to you, General Manager.
Thanks, Councillor Jessup. I did check in with the board just to make sure I could share it, given we're in open council, but largely the funds went to KPMG for their second instalment on the workforce review, which is principally all of it, bar a few minor payments for an accounting software subscription and a little bit of HR work. So the value of that will hopefully be demonstrated as we get into the next steps of strategy for the Jobs Hub, and then looking forward to seeing some of that economic information also made available more broadly as we go forward. But I'll just be looking to check in with the board.
Yes, Councillor Temby.
I was waiting till the Jobs Hub section, but I was going to ask about the KMPG report. Apparently it's supposed to be completed by the 30th of June. Has that been completed, and will we be briefed on the sort of what the outcomes will be? Because just from a strategic perspective, to understand what the results are. Thank you.
I agree. Having read the paper, it's a really good paper and report. I just need to check with the board as to their willingness to share that, and equally with KPMG how much they're looking to share it. I know the last one would have been made available to us as we were going through that process. So this one largely has just been an update to the Huon Valley position, but equally having a look at Kingborough and their position similar to what was painted for the Huon Valley. So I'll check with the board as to, well, the board and KPMG as to how willing they are for it to be shared more fully.
Yes, Councillor.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Just touching on that report that KPMG? Yep. Is that a one-off or is that a continuous thing? Like, is it just a one-off fee or do they do that yearly?
No, it was a commission report for current situation and over the term.
So it's just a one-time for the 3 years?
Well, the board and organisation will determine when it needs reviewing. It's a bit like our strategic framework. You need to update this information to ensure the services and the organisation are progressing to achieve the outcomes under the grant.
Okay, can I just ask another question? So, without putting you on the spot, because this just popped into my head now, could you summarise Council's role in the Job Hub for the people watching at home or listening? Because I've been asked this a lot and I've tried to explain it as best I can, but it might come better from somebody that's had more involvement than myself.
Well, Council's role is really governor, ultimately. So we've appointed a board of skilled individuals to be able to lead this particular initiative and acquit the grant that we've been provided by the state government to deliver on. So that's looking at creating jobs, building a training profile across the valley and into the Kingaroy region as well. So ours is largely just to keep them accountable, as we as a council do with management, I guess, in a sense. So they'll provide the quarterly reports I think we get to allow us to keep an eye on progress. I can assure you that state government are equally monitoring with their interest around the funding, and Stuart and his team from State Growth have been really supportive.
Thank you, because that's pretty much what I said, and I've also explained that, I've actually spoken to people from the other workplace employment agencies, and they're actually supportive of the hub as well, and they think that it will complement their services quite well. And I might say I was a little bit of a negative Nancy when this whole thing arrived, but I have changed my mind. Thank you.
It's getting a lot of support already, and Erin, who's now in place from an operational perspective, along with the board, are starting to get some traction with websites and engaging with people looking for jobs.
And there are jobs out there. They've just got to connect the two together. That's the thing, and I think that's the lacking link in it all. But I can see it working well now, but I couldn't really focus that before. So it's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other? No? Okay. Move on to 13.3, Councillor's Notice of Motion. Councillor O'Neill, are you happy to move the motion as included in the reports?
Yes, Mayor, happy to move that motion.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to speak to this motion? Councillor O'Neill?
Yes, Mayor, just say a few words on it. I think there's some quite historical anchors in this collection. Probably of note would be the George III anchor, which went down in 1835 just south of Dover, and I think there's 130 mainly convicts lost their lives in that event, which is quite sad. So there's about 12 items all up. There's the Hope, which was 1827. I'm not sure the history of the Hope, but obviously these anchors sort of stand about 2 metres high, so they're quite significant.
Yep.
And I think it's not going to be a great cost to gather these and relocate them to a safe place and just have them there, and we can take our time to decide where is the best place to display these items, and there'll be no rush to do that, and hopefully some grants could be found to help that out. And I also see that volunteer could get involved with with the sort of putting him in a certain spot, so it might not be a huge cost to the council in that way either. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity.
Thank you very much. And this was Councillor Gibson brought this along to, and then is not here to do this. So thank you for stepping in for that for him. And as it states there that there's no rush, but as long as we maintain them, I'm sure arts and culture and history. Yeah.
Yep. I've been to the site, and there's probably a bit of urgency to take them from that site, because that place could be sold.
Yes.
At some stage.
Yep. All right. Do we have any? Did I have a? Yeah, it was Councillor. Do anyone else to speak to that? Yes, Councillor Temby.
Yeah, I just wondered if the Arts and Culture Committee might be interested in looking at interpretation, so some signage and getting perhaps some grants to tell the stories of the different things.
And I'm sure that Councillor Gibson had a lot of those things in his mind, and and I'm sure he'll have a talk about it at some other stage when he's back. So, do I have anyone else to speak? Okay, and you didn't want to close, David? Okay, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda number 15.028/23, the Future of Local Government Review. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Jessup. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly. It's just a complicated situation, and I think we've all made the decision as best with what we thought, but of course it's going to differ. It could go on for quite a while, so I hope that it's well received.
Thank you. Do I have anyone else to speak to this one? Yes, Councillor Temby.
Thank you. As you know, I see this as an opportunity, and I'm worried that we don't grasp this opportunity to actually look at what areas we can do to save through things like sharing. And I know that there's been concerns in the past of some areas where it hasn't paid off, but I do think shared services are things, and even the state government taking over some of the areas that are common throughout all of the 29 councils. But, I don't think that the state government has taken, or the information packs hasn't really covered the transition costs involved in amalgamation, and who would bear those costs, and really outlined the benefit of amalgamation. So I think there's a lot more work to be done, and I agree with Dr. Liz Smith speaking about keeping an open mind and having a dialogue with Kimbra. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Armstrong.
Sorry, Mayor. They're all good points, Councillor Temby, but also if we could just remind everybody that when this was done, this came to us, and it was like there's been some comments made about the cost of mail-outs and all this sort of arrangement, and we had very little time to sort of talk about this. We had very little information given to us, and what we had wasn't really useful, I suppose, to a certain extent. So it's been a really difficult process, and there has been a bit of toing and froing and... Oh, I thought you was going to interrupt me. So I think people just need to remember that even though it came to us, it wasn't our idea, it was a government initiative. And really, from when it hit the table to when it hit the public with the surveys, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks. Very, very small amount of time to actually consult with our residents and community. So it wasn't probably the best result, but it was a result, which was better than no result. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have... Yes, Councillor Camber-Smith.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, thanks to our director for pulling together our various submissions, because we all had slightly different inputs. While I'm marginally in favour of staying as scenario 1, I think it's only a viable option within the review if we include concrete proposals for resource sharing and closer collaboration with our neighbouring municipalities and through the STCA, for example. I think we could include, things in our submission that say how we will, forge closer links and work with them and look for opportunities. And although there was only a small number of residents, staff and councillors that responded to the survey, 2/3 of them were actually in favour of some form of amalgamation, and I think we need to recognise that. Also, I've several times requested we get some expert guidance on this, pretty important strategic matter, especially given that scenario 3, at least by my sort of limited analysis, appears to be just a bigger and harder business as usual, and we've put that as our second option. That it's very much an emotional decision, I think, perhaps if we'd had some analysis done on the financial viability of that and the opportunities and the challenges presented by each scenario, we might have come to different conclusions, or we might have come to the same ones, I don't know, but without that it's difficult to know. I also think we could list, same as Councillor Temby, I think we should have listed functions that state government should be taking on to help LGAs, which, they clearly are putting all the blame for every failure on local government instead of recognising their own shortcomings as well in this regard. So I'm not sure. I think there's probably, and I know we're running out of time, but I think perhaps there's some more we could put into the submission to make it more representative of both our views and those of our community, and to, as Councillor Temby says, keep the door open for further collaboration.
I think that's going to happen regardless. I think that the state government will be, there will be that we will be meeting with Kingborough or whoever it might be in that resourcing. If you want to make changes to what we already have, Councillor Campbell-Smith, you know what the go is. So we did go through this. We did talk about what we want to do. So what way do you want to go?
Well, maybe we could just add something to the motion that says that we commit to further conversations with Kingborough Council about the opportunities that or the proposals that they have, and then to bring those back to councillors or something of that nature.
Is the word change I need to do? So the mover and seconder. Oh, sorry. The mover and seconder. Are you happy? Yep, Debbie and Mark. Are you happy with the changes of the wording in the recommendation?
It depends what it's changed to.
It was just to add a.
Sorry, I was looking at the recommendation when you.
I know. Sorry, it was just to add a C that we commit as a council to holding further conversations with Kingborough Council to explore possible resource sharing opportunities or collaborative efforts in the future.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Temby.
I just wondered if you wanted to add that we also enter into a negotiation with the state government as to what services they could provide holistically across the state to relieve the pressure off local government.
Can I just have a comment on that one? I think that that decision of what state government's role is going to be will come about once we have those discussions with the other another council. That I think that I mean, but it's up to you if you wanted to add that as well.
I think you're probably right there, Mayor. I think if Councillor Timber is happy with that we, through negotiating and talking with Kingbury, one of the outcomes might be that we write to state government.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're happy with that? Yep. Okay. Yes. All right. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, just I'm happy with the amendment. That's fine. But just to state, scenario 3 probably is a bigger version of the present situation we're in, and I think that's a good thing. I think we actually are a good council, and I think we give good service, and that would be a good outcome for everybody in our boundary.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Jesser.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 issues. One related to what Councillor Temby said. We have another issues section in the paper, and I certainly wouldn't be averse to the Director adding a third point in that. We've got Bruny Island World Heritage Area, but I think there is a legitimate third heading about the transfer of responsibilities from state government to local government, and the opportunities for local government to pick up, for state government to pick up some burdens. I was just talking to the General Manager today about the situation with registration of Child Safe organisation. It looks like the state government has very generously given that role to local government without consulting with us. So, yeah, I think we've got to name up the elephant in the room. I go to a meeting with Minister Street on the care community, and at every meeting he says, local government's got responsibility for resilience, local government's got responsibility, and none of this is funded, and it is examples of the state removing themselves. So I'm happy if you want to, we obviously can't wordsmith that today, but I think there is a legitimate point to raise. The second point, my glass is half full here, and I do see the third option as a great opportunity, as Councillor O'Neill was saying. I do think we do things very well. We have well, it might not look like it if you look in here sometimes, but we do have a good balance, I think, between the environment and the community and rural activities and agriculture. I do know people who live on the other side of the hill in the Kingborough Shire, and they, as agriculturalists, I don't think they feel anywhere near as loved as our agriculturalists do. So again, I would encourage to get on the front foot of this maybe and look at some economic analysis, because I'm not convinced that it's a bad option. I think Bruny is obviously an issue, but yeah, if there is any opportunity to get some economic analysis, either redoing Felmingham's report or something like that, where we just do a bit of desk research, so when the council does get asked by Minister Street, well, how would you make this work, we don't just look blankly at him and say, you tell us, and maybe we need to lobby the government to pay for that, but I think there's $20,000 that could be well spent to really help us articulate an economic argument, because I do think there is a positive economic argument there. Thank you.
Anyone else? I just want to say that the one thing that the more I've been looking this week and the more I look at what we do, that Yuin Valley word is in everything. It's everything we represent. It's how we represent ourselves. So I'm very mindful of that fact. That's how we're known. You're in the valley, or you're down the Yuin Valley. So Anyway, back to Councillor Armstrong. Do you wish to close?
Not really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are moving the motion with the amendment to C. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda number 15.029/23, Yuin Jobs Hub Authority Progress Report, July 2023. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Armstrong and a seconder. Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to... No, don't wish to speak? Okay. Do I have any other that would like to speak to this?
Good work, General Manager.
Thank you.
It's coming together.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to you next door.
I think I would defer to the team. It's been a lot of work from Matt and Michelle Gladhill working on getting this up, and obviously now the board and Erin. So I certainly can't take any credit for this one.
We will pass.
But we'll pass it
that
on.
on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So you don't wish to close? No. Okay. All those in favour of this motion, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors, and the motion is carried. 16 point, agenda number 16.013-23, Community Wellbeing Fees and Charges, 2023-2024. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Jessup, and a seconder, Councillor Temby. Yep, leaving the room. Do you wish to speak to this motion, Councillor Jessup?
No, I think, Mayor, we've discussed this in workshops and budget processes, so no, I think I'm happy with this. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have any other councillors which would like to speak to this? Yes, Councillor Temby.
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank the Huon Valley Arts and Culture Committee. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry that we're doing the wellbeing fees and charges.
Oh, wellbeing fees and charges.
Yes, sorry.
Are you happy seconding that, are you?
Yes.
To say no more on that, Councillor Jessup. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all. That's all bar. Yep, thank you. And the motion is carried. We have now agenda number 18.003/23, Huon Arts and Culture Committee membership. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Temby and Councillor Canberra-Smith. Seconded. Councillor Temby, do you wish to speak to this motion?
Yes, thank you. As I was going to say earlier.
Yeah, that's fine.
I really do appreciate all of the committees that are working throughout the Huon Valley and the volunteers that really support the community, and they're doing a great job, and I welcome Alice Toner and Deb Coburn.
Yep. Lovely, thank you very much. Do I have anyone else to speak that would like to speak against or speak for? No? Okay. Do you wish to close, Councillor Temby?
I also would like to thank Craig Snell and James Nelson, Kat Scarlett, Jane Alpine, Adi Delaney for their contribution as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, where would we be without the volunteers? Okay, so as there's no one to speak against, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all present. Councillor Burgess. Huon Valley Emergency Management, agenda item 18.004/23. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Canberra-Smith and Councillor Burgess. Councillor Canberra-Smith, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I've got some sort of questions and points to make.
Yes.
Presumably through to Councillor Burgess as the chair. I also wanted to pick up on some of the issues in 1.9 context, which I think needs updating in respect to where people live. The document says that it refers to 5 major towns, and it goes on to say about some other smaller
Yeah,
area.
can I just say one thing? Then I'll let you go. That's fine. This came to us as a draft. This has actually been signed off now. This report's been signed off by the Commissioner of Police. That's correct.
Did we ever get to review it as a council?
Yes, it came. The draft came before us. This is the document that's actually signed.
Okay.
That's why it's before us. Yeah. Just so that I can give you some background here.
Yeah, so background,
Okay.
point 6, the plan came up in March 2023.
Presumably these are some issues that the committee could take on board for future, in their future discussions then?
And yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. That's where I was
Yeah.
getting to say.
Yeah, sure.
that
Okay,
this
no,
is-
that's fine. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but keep going, sorry, yes?
Well, I know I keep banging on about it, but Mountain River, Crabtree and Grove is 1,500 people, and again, it doesn't figure in terms of where people are living, but 1,500 people is quite a considerable amount of people, and it's the only area that doesn't have a safer place in the event of a bushfire, and I think that ought to be prioritised by the TFS or the committee or whoever is responsible for. And maybe some of the suggestions I made about the community activation area could be taken
Yeah.
on board in that light as well.
Yeah, I think that some communities have done that themselves through the TPS. I know Geeston done theirs through the Tas Fire. The Tas Fire service, and they, as a group of people, came together with Tas Fire.
It's very much easier where there are structures already set up within a township to have those sorts of conversations, and that's, without there being any sort of central meeting area or organisations or anything in this 1,500 sort of conglomeration or population centre. It's hard to initiate those discussions. It's only recent that we've had even Facebook groups set up as a community. It is a newish. So without council input to help facilitate that community building element, it's hard. I can do my best as an individual, but it needs some help, I think, from TFS and the committee and the council to make that happen. Also, I just wanted to point out another communication black spot is the top of Crabtree. There's no signal at all up the top of there. And while we talk about ways of communicating in the event of a blackout, e.g. by VHF and radio, I just wondered how residents are to communicate with one another and with emergency services. So it's just things like that I'd like, perhaps being taken on notice for the committee to have a think about.
Thank you. Yep, thank you. And they're all good things that we can feed back through to Councillor Burgess to take to his next meeting that he has. Yes, Councillor Burgess?
Yeah, I just want to...
You got your microphone on? Yep.
I'd just like to agree with what Jenny said, and we're in the process now. The next step will be the application of giving someone the job of being the coordinator, and that will now become a full-time job. So therefore, it'll be, if you've got suggestions like that, yeah, sure, put them to me, and we can talk to them and get them incorporated and make sure they're in the next review, which should be about 18 months from now, I should imagine.
Yeah.
And lots of little things. I know Councillor Temby, similar sort of views, and hopefully going forward that we can make things start to happen shortly.
I'm just a bit concerned that we are probably about to enter quite a bad bushfire season.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lowish rainfall. Lowish rainfall over winter, mild winter, and forecast of an El Nino event. I think we could be in for a long, hot, dry summer,
Yes.
and we're going to
Yep.
need to be extra prepared.
There's no doubt about that, and I believe also that we, and I know that there's been some focus on, some of the other areas not having the numbers, but once you go over that bridge, you're one way out.
I know.
And so certain people, I think, when it gets sort of looked at, is also within so many kilometres away from the next area that they can go to. So there is lots of different things that are involved in that, but definitely Councillor Burgess is very keen to be active in this area, and I'm sure he'll be all over the TFS and wanting them to at least have a look at our areas and tell us the best ways about going about engaging with the communities that haven't got their plans in place.
I'll send you a map with my ideas.
Councillor Temby.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking that on board, and I do want to congratulate Huon Valley Council for this plan and for the initiative of putting on an emergency management coordinator. I think we have accepted that it is a high priority for us, and there is a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And we do need to get the community involved as well, because we can't do it on our own, but it's a matter of working out how we can do that constructively and with the right training and all that sort of stuff. But that will all come through the plan.
Yeah.
And I wish them all the very best in the implementation. So thank you.
Yeah, and I also believe that we will have an opportunity, not so much Crabtree but Mountain River, when we have the whole committee AGMs and we go to those. I think it's that good for the councillors to go along and encourage them to have that conversations and move forward. Yes.
I think we could really revitalise the halls and use those as hubs, because we have halls right throughout the Huon Valley. Yeah. Even, like you mentioned, one way in, one way out, Lonavale, is another far-reaching area, and exit routes and things like that. Yeah. So, yeah.
And I think a lot of people, once they build in a lot of these places and live in a lot of these places, they do realise the risk. And we are in a bushfire area, but we can be proactive, and the council officers always are. When they're at the AGMs, they talk about all different scenarios that's coming up that can happen. So it's a good platform to start. So, yes, would you allow you to speak?
Can I just clarify Councillor Burgess's comment, because he did mention a full-time resource, and I just wanted to clarify that we approved a part-time resource in our budget, so we are working through that. I just wanted to clarify that, just in case anyone's watching.
Yes.
Wasn't it 2 part-time positions?
Yes, there's 2 different positions.
There's an emergency management and emergency recovery.
Yeah, and a climate change.
Separately,
Yes,
okay.
Which all falls into that same area of, okay, so do I have any other to speak? Jenny, would you like, Cam Smith, would you like to finish?
Just to say it's an extraordinarily detailed and long report, and somebody's put an enormous amount of effort into that, so thank you.
I believe that the officer concerned in that role at the moment, her figures and her keeping of records is strict. Yes, that's exactly right. So well done to them. Okay, so if we have no other, we'll put the motion. I'll put the motion forward. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Closed session 19.033/23. We're about to move into closed council, so I'd like to thank those in the gallery tonight for attending and those watching at home. The next meeting, or the ordinary meeting of council, is Wednesday the 30th of August at 6 p.m. So thank you guys. Thanks for coming and thanks for sitting there.
As Brigade Chief of
Thank you. Yep, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Steve. Yeah. Thank you very much. And before the cameras finish, I'd just like to. I know my sister in Melbourne is watching from hospital, so hi, Jane. Yeah, I did. I have. I said, "Really, you're watching, Council?" She said, "Yeah, I want to see what you do, Sal." Yeah.
She might not want to after